Most of them, at the bottom of the page in very small grey letters, say, "Oh, the output of this may not be entirely correct, and you may want to check it." But it's not like the warning on a packet of cigarettes. It's teeny, 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 teeny down the bottom of the screen, and what that means is most people just take it on spec. So what they're doing is they want to be at the front because guess what? Down the line, that's where the advertising revenue comes from. That's where the power of the LLMs come from because the more you put in, the more you get out. And that information has a value down the line. And that's why they're pushing it so hard.
Hello and welcome to the Tech Report. I'm Louis Sykes. Today we're joined by Graham Stewart, Head of Public Sector at Checkpoint, the cybersecurity company fundamental in the creation of the firewall. Graham, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Graham, Google's CEO Sundar Pichai has issued a warning to the world not to blindly trust AI. What's behind this warning and why should we be cautious when using these large language models?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's all over their website. It's one of the tools they use. Fundamentally, the technology, particularly behind the large language models, is still quite immature. So fundamentally, what they do is they take a system and they stuff as much information into it as possible, and that uses various algorithms to then interrogate that information and present you with an answer. There's a number of interesting things around this. So one of the big things that I don't think gets talked about often enough before we get to the kind of mainstream stuff is quite often within these LLMs, you'll have an inherent bias, an editorial bias. So if you think about, if you pick up the Guardian newspaper, you have a reasonable idea of their editorial stance on what you're going to read in the columns. If you pick up the Times or the Telegraph or I don't know, the Sun or the Sport, you know what you're getting. The problem with these LLMs is you don't understand quite what the editorial bias is, and that will affect the way the algorithms work, and that will affect the output that you're receiving. Now, the problem with it is that this stuff spits out in a lovely, smooth, authoritative voice. It's the kind of, it sort of has this kind of lovely tone about it. It's like listening to Michael Parkinson. You just listen to everything it says and goes, boom, this is the truth. So if you flip this back to 3-4 years ago, so if you go, oh, I've got a bit of an eye infection, I'm just going to go onto Google or Bing and I'm going to put my symptoms in and it would spit out goodness how many known responses, and you kind of wade through that and you go, okay, it's an eye infection, I don't have Ebola. The kind of, for comedic effect to make the point, I can put my symptoms in to a large language model and it would spit out Ebola, but do it in a lovely, soothing way. And I go, oh my God, I've got Ebola. And extreme to make the point. The point is that because they're authoritative, people believe them. And because there isn't a page full of links for you to click on, there is, but most people aren't going to bother clicking through the links to look at the background of the information that sits behind it. What that means is they accept it at face value. So you've got the editorial bias, you don't quite know where the information has come from, and this general acceptance that the information presented to you is true. That can't always be the case. Okay, that can't always be the case. In the same way that there are items presented on the news periodically that aren't as they appear. There are also, within an LLM, and because it's such an immature technology, this is still sort of building up this kind of head of steam. And the big point behind it is that it gets used for all kinds of things. People use it for all kinds of stuff, including, and jumping ahead potentially to the latter part of the conversation, for creating cyber attacks. And that's one of the things that kind of occupies my world the entire time, is because what AI is doing is it's a technological leap forward. So if you think about the people in the mills smashing up the looms in the 19th century because they thought it was taking their jobs. If you think about the typing pools in offices in the 60s and 70s, they're all gone. So a technological revolution is taking place right now, and we're not quite sure where that takes us. We're in that kind of situation where we're not sure. I'm metaphorically working in the typing pool. What does that mean for my job? And so what he's talking about is this level of caution, the uncertainty about what it means, the uncertainty of the output, and the uncertainty of where it takes us.
And yet, Google, along with many other AI companies, have really wholeheartedly embraced AI. As you mentioned, Google's own LLM Gemini now appears at the top of most, if not all, Google searches completely by default. Is there a level of irresponsibility here among some tech companies in the way that AI is being marketed?
I think irresponsibility is potentially quite a strong way of describing it. What I would say is this: it's undoubtedly the next big leap forward. Okay, really since the launch of the browser, really in the kind of early 90s, this is the next big leap forward, and everyone wants to be at the front of the game, and everyone wants to be ChatGPT is kind of morphed into the word. Like Google, I Google something, or ChatGPT is kind of the metaphor for the LLMs. All of them want to be at the front of that, which means certain things, to my view, are they're not putting cautions. I mean, most of them at the bottom of the page in very small grey letters say, "Oh, the output of this may not be entirely correct, and you may want to check it." But it's it's not like the warning on a packet of cigarettes. It's teeny down the bottom of the screen, and what that means is most people just take it on spec. So what they're doing is they want to be at the front, because guess what? Down the line, that's where the advertising revenue comes from. That's where the power of the LLMs come from, because the more you put in, the more you get out, and that information has a value down the line, and that's why they're pushing it so hard.
So is there a role for a regulator here, and maybe not even a traditional business or technology regulator, but something like Ofcom to give an almost editorial set of rules for LLMs?
I think so. I think there's because this crosses the boundary between Ofcom and the ICO, and I think, like anything, as technology goes forward, you have this concept of legislative lag, where legislation and successive governments, not just ours, around the world, struggles to keep up with technology. So if there's the classic example of someone being caught in 1964 on the M1 doing 190 miles an hour. And so at that point, government goes, we probably should do something about this. And that's where the 70 mile an hour speed limit. But it took 3 years to get that through Parliament. The problem is 3 years in our current state of affairs is too long. But the legislative lag, because it's really hard to get this stuff into legislators' heads, get it approved, get all the outputs, the outcomes thought through. And so it's really hard. But I definitely think there's something that sits between the ICO, between Ofcom, that puts pressure on these organisations to have controls and measures in place. The only caveat I would add to this is, if you look at the difficulty that regulatory authorities around the world have had with social media and limiting, how children access it. In the UK, we've got the Online Safety Act, but that's taken 20 years to come to fruition. We probably need to be doing this an awful lot quicker, and I don't for a moment suggest that that's an easy task.
And of course, this warning about trusting AI coming out of Google, and this discussion we're having today has been about companies that are, at least to some extent, beholden to regulators and the laws of the countries they operate within. But how could bad actors take advantage of AI in that sense?
So if we step back to something we said a moment ago, where we talked about the fact that jobs were replaced. Take the typing pool, okay? So the reason typing pool was replaced is because word processors and latterly, Office and all those types of tools massively increased the productivity, which means a business could cut its costs by getting rid. Don't need a typing pool anymore. Execs can type their own emails, right? No one needs to write a memo out and send it round. It's gone. And so one of the fundamental things that AI tools do, and there are lots of them, not just LLMs, if you take a step back, this is about a productivity increase. And guess what? AI is really good at developing cyber offensive tools and malware and ransomware and everything else. So these are being used. There was a report about a couple of days ago about one of the AI tools being used to develop ransomware. It's a productivity increase. So forget all the other the bit that goes with this. AI is going to do a productivity increase in the development of ransomware. And what it means is it's easier, and it's easier to build it, and it's easier to fine tune it, and it's easier to orchestrate an a ransomware attack or a malware attack. So, but this is just a productivity shift, and that's the bit that's really interesting here. And we are seeing case after case after case of AI-generated ransomware flying around the world.
So what can companies do to reduce this risk, or the risk in general of people taking AI at face value when it provides facts to them that could be, or information to them that could actually be misinformation?
So from a corporate perspective, organisations like mine provide tools as part of a security portfolio, and so we will, there's a kind of traditional sort of technology that we provide. So Checkpoint, one of its claims to fame is we invented the firewall, which almost everybody now, even that's not worked for a company or is technically literate, goes, so I kind of know what that is, because it kind of comes with my router on my home, and it just stops the bad guys getting in and the bad stuff and the good stuff getting out. It's a bit more than that, but that's what it is. So companies like mine are developing tools to allow companies to regulate and stop people putting the wrong information. You don't want, Steve in accounts dumping this year's figures into the LLM to get him to make it look pretty. That's then owned by the LLM, and if it's in a regulated financial environment, that could be pretty catastrophic for shares and financial conduct authority. So there's that bit of it, and then there's this idea that people are just using it, and I mean I use it all the time. I use it to reorder my thoughts. I use it to help me with write presentations, and it's a fabulous tool or tool sets for doing that. The problem with it is if companies don't have a control over what's being used, as you might imagine, ours is quite nailed down, and I can't do anything stupid. Which is a blessing, but if as a company, if you're not aware that this is being used, and let me tell you, it is, whether you like it or not, people in your organisation are using this technology. If it's not done in a controlled fashion, you potentially could be hosing this information all over the internet, and so companies need to A, accept that it's being used, and B, think about how they're going to control it. And if that's a case of giving people corporate versions of these products, which are available, that's one route, but you still need to apply controls. Or just saying, we're going to use it, but we're going to use some technology to actually control how you use it. Because if you don't, it's what's known as shadow IT, okay? And it's the stuff that isn't provided by your IT department. It's the stuff you're using yourself. And the shadow IT stuff has been a problem for years. And this AI just takes it on a factor of 100 in terms of its threat to an organisation.
And on the individual basis as well, what can we ourselves do to reduce becoming a victim of rogue AI or just false information provided by something like ChatGPT?
So, there's a well-worn trope, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So if you were to ask me for about emails and text messages, right, because everyone's had a text message, particularly this time of year, Royal Mail saying, oh, I need £2.19 to deliver your parcel, and you go, okay, that's really quick, I'll do that. Or, your streaming provider says your credit card has run out, and you need to put, oh, God, I can't have the kids. Right, okay, there's my card. Right, stop. If something looks too good to be true, it probably is. But also, you need to be suspicious if you're not expecting these things. And so there's loads of different tips you can do. Hover over the email address. That'll show you generally that it's absolute rubbish, the email address. Anything asking for your personal information that you weren't expecting, or the bank needs to get in touch. That's the other big one you see. Bank needs to get in touch. The bank will never phone you, will never email you, okay? And if it does, if you do get the phone call, if you do get the email, phone the bank yourself. Put the phone down, delete the email, phone the bank. Okay? So you need to be really suspicious. The way I always treat these things, and the way I always tell people to treat these things is, if someone rocked up at your door at 8 o'clock on a wet Wednesday night and asked you for your bank information, you'd laugh in their face. And this is the kind of electronic version of this. The problem with AI is that it makes the grammar really nice. It's got this, it generates a nice authoritative tone. Like I said, the Michael Parkinson effect. You go, oh, yeah, that looks legit. You have to be really super suspicious of these things. Anything asking you for something, for personal information, for banking information, you have to be suspicious of it. If you're not sure, like the bank one is the big one, okay? There's loads of reports of, people being phoned, generally, people in sort of vulnerable people, sort of elderly people or like that, being phoned by the bank, okay? So there's two things you can do there. The first thing you can do is you can put the phone down and phone the bank yourself. The second one is you can dial 159 and report a fraud. And those things are available. So I guess the summary of this is people have to be super suspicious the entire time. It's the wet Wednesday night. If someone turned up asking for your details at 8 o'clock on a wet Wednesday night, would you give it to them?
Graham Stewart from Head of Public Sector at Checkpoint, thank you very much for joining me today on the Tech Report.
Thanks a lot.